All right, let's dive in. Today we're tackling a topic that's, well, let's face it, not the most glamorous part of retirement planning. Long-term care.
Yeah, not exactly a beach vacation, right?
Not quite, but hey, it's something we all need to be aware of. And to help us get a handle on this, we've been digging into some insights from Diversified Insurance Brokers. They really lay out the essentials of what long-term care is, why it matters, and why we really can't afford to ignore it in our financial planning.
Absolutely. I mean, most of us, when we talk about retirement, it's about the fun stuff, right? Traveling, hobbies, spending time with family. But the reality is that potential health needs down the road, especially long-term care, are a big piece of the puzzle.
So let's break it down. What exactly are we talking about when we say long-term care? What does that actually look like in practice?
It's basically a whole range of services that provide extended health and personal care support. It's mainly geared towards people who find themselves unable to manage those everyday tasks, the things we often take for granted.
Yeah, just getting through the day.
Exactly. The source calls these activities of daily living, or ADLs. Things like bathing, dressing, eating, using the toilet, managing continence, even just moving around.
Basic stuff that suddenly becomes, well, not so basic when you need help. And it's not always just about physical limitations, right?
Right. Cognitive issues like Alzheimer's disease or other forms of dementia can also be a trigger for needing long-term care. And that's regardless of someone's physical abilities.
And I think a lot of people, when they hear long-term care, they automatically picture a nursing home. But it sounds like it's a lot broader than that.
Definitely. It's not just nursing homes. Long-term care can happen in your own home, assisted living facilities, community-based programs. There are a lot of options.
And different levels of care as well, right?
Yeah, you've got skilled care, which involves licensed medical professionals. They handle things like administering medications, wound care, that kind of thing. Then there's custodial care. This is more about assistance with those ADLs we talked about, and it doesn't necessarily require medical training.
So it's a pretty wide spectrum. And this need for long-term care, it seems to be growing. Why is that such a big issue these days?
Well, people are living longer. And while that's amazing news, of course, it does mean there's a greater chance of needing some form of long-term care at some point. The stats back this up, too. Over half of people 65 and older are projected to need at least some long-term care.
Wow, that's a huge number. And I imagine the costs associated with it are pretty significant.
Oh, yeah, they can be a real burden. The average cost for a private room in a nursing home is over $90,000 a year. And assisted living, that's averaging over $3,500 a month. These expenses can really eat into retirement savings if you're not prepared.
Which brings us to this whole question of how people think they're covered. And it sounds like there's a pretty big misconception out there.
There is. A lot of people assume Medicare will cover long-term care, but in reality, it only covers short-term rehabilitation after a hospital stay, not the extended care most people would need.
So Medicare isn't the safety net many think it is. What about Medicaid?
Medicaid does cover long-term care, but it's got very strict financial requirements. You often have to spend down your assets to qualify.
So for a lot of retirees, there's this gap in coverage. That's where planning ahead becomes so important.
Exactly. And the source, Diversified Insurance Brokers, points to long-term care insurance as a key strategy. It's designed specifically to address these costs.
Makes sense. But it sounds like there are other options too, right?
There are. Certain life insurance policies and annuities can have long-term care riders. These can offer coverage and also provide some asset protection.
So you're not just paying for care, you're also safeguarding your assets. And there are different things to look for in these plans, right? Like, what are some of the bells and whistles?
Well, some policies offer a return of premium option. That can be attractive. You also want to look for inflation protection so your benefits keep pace with rising costs. Some policies even allow for shared coverage between spouses, which can be helpful.
Sounds like there's a lot to unpack when choosing a plan. What are some of the key things people should be paying attention to?
It's important to understand the levels and settings of care that are covered. What conditions actually trigger the benefits? How long is the elimination period, that waiting period before the benefits kick in? And of course, the tax implications of LTC insurance are something to consider as well.
So really, it's about being informed, being proactive, making sure you've thought through these things well in advance.
Absolutely. Not factoring in the potential need for long-term care can lead to some serious financial challenges down the road.
Okay, so let's do a quick recap. We've learned from Diversified Insurance Brokers that long-term care is a potential major expense in retirement, and it's not something that Medicare or Medicaid fully covers.
Right. Planning is key. You've got options like long-term care insurance and even life insurance or annuities with LTC riders. But you got to do your homework.
Exactly. Now, for our listeners, here's something to chew on. We've talked about the financial side of things, but have you thought about the kind of care you'd want? Where would you prefer to receive care if you needed it? And how would you want to ensure your wishes are respected? Thinking through those questions now can make a big difference down the line.
Definitely. It's not just about the money. It's about your well-being and having a plan in place.
Food for thought. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into long-term care. And remember, planning ahead can give you peace of mind and help you enjoy those retirement years to the fullest.
Absolutely.